never, we can't run the system. We need to also operate the system. If the system's not clean, if it's not properly staffed, etc., it's not going to run either. And so it seems unrealistic to me that 20 years from now we could have every dollar from fare increases going to capital, because we wouldn't have enough to run our system. So as a thought experiment, I was thinking, well, what if we had to operate the system that we have today off of our 1972 fares, right? It's 40 cents a ride or whatever. We couldn't do it. We just wouldn't have enough to pay for the operations of our system. So we're going to need to re-examine this at some point. I agree, yes, let's start dedicating these funds to capital. But at some point, we're not going to have enough to operate the system. And some board of directors, it may not be us, is going to have to re-examine this and say, okay, some portion of those fare increases are necessary to sustain the system, because, Contra Costa times notwithstanding, it's totally unrealistic that your real operating dollars could decline several percentage points a year on into the rest of history, and you could continue to run a system. That's public comment from a man who's clearly never run a transit system. Even if we kept all of our costs growing at a little below the rate of inflation, there's still going to be an increase. It's just going to cost more to run the system, even as we've done, if you account for increased productivity, if you run the system smarter, if you're investing in capital in ways that reduce your operating costs, it'll still cost more. So it's unrealistic to do this over the long run, but I think as the general managers laid out, over the next few years especially, we just need to make sure that we can commit to what we're calling the big three here, the rail car replacement, the Hayward Maintenance Complex, and a new train control system. Some of that, I think we're looking at a quarter of the total would come from BART sources. 3/4 would get matched by those grants that we were talking about earlier. That's still a lot of money. I'm hoping it's less than a quarter that we could end up putting in, because even this money that we're talking about today is going to be totally inadequate to that. So I'm willing to support it, but just on the knowledge that this isn't going to go on forever. And I also, we need to correct the record. I think there needs to be a response to the folks who think that you can never increase fares and still run a transit system, because the cost of everything else keeps going up, right? That's just inflation. That's just what happens in a modern economy. So, anyhow, with that, I support it. But unless Director Keller, do you have any ideas about, should we put a time limit on this? Should we just say, because you know as well as I do that, 30 years from now, we can't still be doing this.
But 2 points that were made that I'd like to at least address. And your last one was a very good one. This money represents about 25% of the money that we need in order to accomplish these goals that are necessary to maintain this district. Without this money, we can't leverage the other 75%. So it's not an either or. We have to do both, or that 75% of outside money is not going to be available to us. If we go to our funding partners and say we need 100% of the rail cars, they're going to tell us, we'll go find some money. This is our attempt to go find some money. The CPI increase is only limited to a decade. So by definition, at the end of this period, if we don't revisit this, and I'm certainly willing, if we accomplish our capital shortfalls or there's progress, I'm certainly willing to revisit this at some point. But even if we don't revisit it for the life of this CPI fare increase, it's only 10 years, and then this issue has to come back before the board for additional consideration. And at that time, it's entirely possible a decade from now. Let's hope that we've achieved our capital improvements. We've found the funds. We've made a good turnaround in a 40-year-old system that by that time will be 50 years old, and we can refocus the energy and the needs of the district and use this money for operations. Because I agree with you. I think your point about if we were operating on 1972 fares, we wouldn't be able to run a district is more than appropriate. So I think we have to have the flexibility. But the key point today for me is, if we don't raise this money and we don't dedicate it for the purposes that are outlined in this restatement, we won't be able to leverage the additional money that's necessary to make these improvements. So I think that's the overriding interest that I have in bringing this before the board.
Any other director comments on this? Okay. We've got a motion in a second. So, colleagues, if you please vote electronically.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. So we are on to item 8B. I put this on at, I requested putting this on, but it was actually at the request of some of my colleagues here who have an interest in changing the times that we meet. So there's no proposal on the table, but what I wanted to do was just allow folks who want to make their case for changes to make that case and have a bit of discussion today. I think if we have a discussion, or it looks like we've got a direction, or at least a few options that we could bring back, formalize, and bring back for your consideration, we can do that at a subsequent meeting. So, any colleagues wish to jump in here? Director Saltzman? Director Miller?
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. I was one of the directors who requested to bring this issue forward. Something that I've seen for a long time, since well before I was on the board, is that this meeting time is extremely inconvenient for the public. Most of our riders and most of the people who are interested in what the district does, they work, they go to school. 9 a.m. on a Thursday is extremely inconvenient. I think we saw that when we had a public hearing on the fare increases and the parking fee changes, that we had, I think, 4 people come to that public hearing, and clearly there were far more than 4 people interested in that issue. But it's very difficult to get here at 9 a.m. on a Thursday. So I think we should look into at least testing out having some evening meetings. I think there would be greater public participation, and that's something very important to me. We're accountable to the public, and I think their input can improve our decisions, and I think we should be as accessible as possible. I think it would be a benefit not only for people who could come here in person, but since we do stream our meetings, sure, there's some people who will watch them archived, but there's something about having a live meeting. I think you get more people tuning in and wanting to see what's happening live, and maybe even covering it in some ways. There's a lot of civic engagement on social media these days, on Twitter and on Facebook, and people like to cover meetings live as they're happening. So I think we could increase the public knowledge about what we're doing if we have some evening meetings. So that's why I wanted to bring this forward.
Director Miller?
Yeah, I want to echo everything my colleague Director Saltzman has pointed out. I am of the opinion that the public has a right to have an accessible board, and 9 a.m. on a weekday is far from that. I understand this has been trialed in the past and meetings were rotated or something. I'm not completely sympathetic to what I've heard of the lack of public attendance on occasion demonstrates that we should not be accessible to the public. I simply don't concur with that. I do, newscasts happen in the evening, so this idea of a live, having this in the evening so that the newscast can provide it live, etc., I think is beneficial as well. I understand that there are some nooks and crannies that some colleagues have concerns about. Meetings lasting till 2 a.m., the order of closed session, things of that sort. And that's what I really, assuming there's at least initial interest, like to have a discussion about. Many city councils put closed session items before the meeting, and there's a certain time that they end. I don't know if that could work for BART or not, but a lot of city councils practice that effort. I know others that have a last time to begin new items. City of Hercules does not take any new items after 11 p.m. So as a result, anything beyond the item that is taking place at 11 p.m. is diverted to the next meeting. So these are nooks and crannies that I'd like to engage discussion about, assuming there is a majority number of colleagues interested in looking at changing the meeting times to be more accommodating and accessible to the public.
Any other? Director Keller?
Well, I think it's worth a try. I mean, I like many of the people who've been here a long time. Some would say I've been here too long. We've all come in with this notion that we'd like to have the meeting in the evening somewhere other than this location. And in my particular case, I fought for months to do a budget hearing at the Concord City Hall. We did some advertising. We had 20 people in attendance, and every one of them worked for BART. There was not one member of the public. That is not to say we shouldn't try it again, because I think it's worth the effort. Because I agree with the transparency argument. I agree with the notion that we serve the public and we should make an effort. So I don't know that I'm in a position today to support a wholesale change, but I think maybe a pilot or two in the next several months, or maybe we're about to engage in something that's going to occupy a lot of our time. So maybe we should let that effort run its course, and then once that effort is successfully completed, as I'm confident it will be, then maybe staff can be planning or think about planning an evening meeting somewhere that would be kind of the first step in seeing whether or not the public is changed and is willing to participate in these types of meetings in the community. I think it's a great idea, and I don't have any objection to it. I'm just reacting to what my experience is, but that was a long time ago, and maybe the world has changed, and we ought to test the waters.
Okay. Director Brennan?
Yes, I'm just having trouble with my memory on our meetings back when we had the straight committees that met separately, and I'm talking to Director Radulovich and Director Keller at this moment, because I don't think they were that way when you got here. Didn't they start at 4:30 in the afternoon?
Mm-hmm. They did.
Okay, so we met on Tuesday afternoons at 4:30, and then Thursday mornings at 9.
Yeah.
So there were a lot more meetings each, and we didn't get a lot of attendance at those meetings. And that was when we were still at Lake Merritt, which kind of is a crossroads for the BART system. So I offer that as one of the options that we had tried in the past. In fact, when I came on the board, inherited that system. We've changed since then to kind of shoehorn everything into Thursday mornings, twice a month, or specials on call of the president. I know that at Capitol Corridor we meet always at Suisun City at is it 10 in the morning?
10.
Yeah.
And then we meet once a year here in this boardroom for the Capitol Corridor train, and that's the next Capitol Corridor Joint Powers Board meeting will be here. So, but those are all 10 o'clock in the morning. We haven't felt it necessary to go to different hours on that. So there are a couple of comments that have been made, and the idea of maybe 4:30 in the afternoon are things that I think should be on the table while we're discussing this. That's all. I've been through so many of these different kinds and different proposals. I'm prepared to talk about anything there is, so let's see if we can't get somewhere.
Director Murray?
I just want to enthusiastically support having some evening meetings. I think that, I thought maybe you would jump in because you and I have discussed this a little bit. But not always having an evening meeting, but having one where we know that there's a topic that the public is interested in, like the fare increases, like the parking, and so forth. And there are many others that the public are interested in, and having those meetings.